A father blames Scientology for breaking up his home.
And it's destroyed the family. We've always been a happy family, and that now has been destroyed.
How dangerous is the worldwide cult that's homed in on the south of England? The young woman in black doesn't know it, but the man is about to try to recruit her into the fastest growing cult in Britain. The man doesn't say he's a Scientologist. He simply asks whether she'd like to take a personality test. It's the first step in a recruiting process with a very high success rate. In Britain, Scientology claims a following of 200,000, the vast majority of them in the south. Scientology, for all its 35-year existence, has been highly controversial. But in places like Brighton, it's become more than just a controversy. Here, it's a day-to-day reality. The young men and women recruited on these streets are joining one of the most active and powerful cults in the Western world. Scientology exerts huge influence, it commands huge wealth. Yet in southern England, the movement's European power base, there's bitter disagreement about what it is and what it stands for. Is it the road to total freedom, as its followers insist, or is it nothing more than a fraud, and in some cases even the road to total ruin? In this program, we'll be looking at new evidence to try to establish whether Scientology is a force for good or for evil. The Scientologists are building themselves a fortress alongside their national headquarters at East Grinstead, St Hill Manor. Here they crusade for a better world, a world they say is achievable only through Scientology.
Well, the aims of Scientology are a world without criminality, without insanity, without war, where, good men can flourish and prosper and achieve their goals. And it's very important that people are free to pursue their own course in life, that they're free to seek spiritual freedom, and that they're not hindered in any way in doing this.
Throughout St Hill are images of the founder and guru of Scientology, American Lafayette Ron Hubbard. Hubbard was a prolific science fiction writer, an American naval officer in the Second World War, an amateur filmmaker and small-time Hollywood scriptwriter, and by the end, a millionaire many times over. Hubbard died last year, but his personality still dominates the cult. His office is kept like a shrine, untouched since his last visit there 20 years ago. Hubbard is dead, but his writings live on in the St Hill Library. Everything he wrote is here, and his word is the gospel. In particular, the Bible of Scientology, Dianetics. Another important legacy of Hubbard's is the E-meter. Most recruits to Scientology have at least one session like this. The E-meter is based on lie detector principles. Scientologists say it measures stress. Trainee counselors are asked to try it out on teddy bears. Hubbard taught that human beings were hindered in developing their full potential by negative experiences they don't even remember. Engrams, he called them. If people could bring these to the surface and overcome them, they'd be well on the road to total freedom. So the E-meter is just a tool in a process of spiritual therapy which the cult calls auditing.
It's called auditing because the practitioner listens mostly. He asks questions and listens to the answers. So really it's a question of directing the person's attention and getting how they feel about it, and perhaps getting them to have a look at new viewpoints on life they haven't looked at before. And the result is that the person sort of says, hey, I didn't know that before. They realize something,
Auditing is supposed to take student Scientologists all the way up the road to freedom. Their ultimate aim is to take control over every aspect of their lives. But the Scientology leadership insists it's not just dogma. They point to their anti-drugs campaigns to show how they're working for the public good. And as further evidence of their good intentions, they single out their bitter opposition to psychiatric methods.
Well, unfortunately, ordinary psychiatric treatment consists of brain surgery, it consists of electric shock treatment, or it consists of drugs. All of these are an attempt to chemically treat something which is more than likely spiritual in nature. So therefore, I could not condone such treatment. It's a basic infringement of human rights to subject somebody to electric shock. I mean, you might as well just beat them over the head with a baseball bat. Probably have a better effect.
Scientologists at St. Hill are proud of their stance on psychiatry, but their many opponents say the cult should not be taken at face value. Among their fiercest critics is Helen Ezekiel. She says in reality the cult is dogmatic and intolerant and does more harm than good. Mrs. Ezekiel blames Scientology for the suicide of her daughter Rita. Rita lived at Crowborough in Sussex with her husband. They were both Scientologists and, like most cult members, strongly opposed psychiatry. But a year ago, Rita became severely depressed.
She cried a lot. She cried and cried, and she could hardly say hello, mum, to me. She was so depressed, especially towards the end of her life. She was so depressed. She cried all the time. She got no sympathy from her husband. He said there's not much wrong with her, just ignore her. When I said to him, why are you ignoring her? You know, she's obviously ill and you're not doing anything about it.
Rita believed the depression was due to an ear infection, and she went to see a specialist, Catherine Milton.
Catherine Milton tested Rita's ear, and she asked her a few questions about herself, and she told Rita that the problem was more psychological than physical, and that she desperately needed to seek psychiatric help.
But Rita refused to see a psychiatrist. She wrote to her mother, "I feel that there is no real help or improvement to be had from psychiatrists, but my turning to them would just be a way to hide from life and problems." Rita committed suicide in March by inhaling car exhaust fumes in a garage. Scientology insists they did not advise her against psychiatric treatment. Today, her mother is still fighting to establish that cult dogma did contribute to Rita's death. Others living in the South despise Scientology, but for different reasons. For example, the cult stands accused of breaking up families. The Lilly family of Bognor Regis on a shopping trip to London posed for a photograph, a happy, carefree moment that to the Lilly parents now seems a lifetime away. John and Pat Lilly say that Scientology has broken up and ruined their family. 2 daughters have become full-time members of the cult. Lissa, 23, recruited in Brighton, is an auditor, and Lucy, 3 years older, works full-time at a house in East Grinstead, looking after Scientology children. At one stage, 3 of the 4 daughters were in the cult. The parents, speaking about their tragedy tonight for the first time, recall one evening last year when the girls came home to confront the couple about their hostility to Scientology. All 3, they say, had changed beyond recognition.
They just arrived on the doorstep and they just didn't look like our daughters. They were completely, well, how would you...
Well, like zombies, weren't they?
Yes, they were. They were.
Yes.
And I think they'd been advised how to handle us by somebody, I don't know who.
They stood there like zombies with a smile on their face and just stated that they wanted to be Scientologists, that this was their life they wanted to pursue, and nothing we said could deter them.
No.
It was so sad to see them. There they were standing there, and we knew that the words emanating from their mouths when they weren't our daughters. They were just like little robots and programmed, and everything we said, one could almost tell was page 5, paragraph 3, parents' objection. It was so obvious.
Lissa and Lucy, after failing to placate their parents, decided instead to disown them. They sent what their parents recognized as disconnection letters, a classic response to critical outsiders, which all Scientologists are taught. In this case, the outsiders were a mother and father. The emotional strain has had traumatic effects. John Lilly has had a nervous breakdown. As a result, he's had to give up his job. The couple now exist on sickness benefit, and they've been forced to sell their home. In view of their father's breakdown, the daughters have had a change of heart about disconnecting, but their allegiance to Scientology is unswerving. The Lillys find that tragic because, in their view, Ron Hubbard is a phony, and new research seems to back this up. Although Scientology described Ron Hubbard as the greatest humanitarian in history, and he himself claimed some remarkable achievements, others who've investigated his life say he was a liar and a cheat. For example, Hubbard claimed he was a nuclear physicist, In fact, he took only a short course in physics and failed. Hubbard claimed he was crippled and blinded in World War II. In fact, he was never even slightly wounded. He also claimed he was a war hero, winning 21 medals. In fact, he got only 4 routine declarations in the US Navy, and none of them for heroism or combat. 3 remarkable claims by Scientology's founder that researchers say don't stand up to scrutiny. The author Russell Miller has just completed a biography on Hubbard, contrasting the claims and the facts. He's called it Barefaced Messiah.
The church, as I'm sure you know, say that Hubbard was a much decorated war hero, that he was the first casualty, he was flown home from the front in the Secretary of State's plane, that he was an intelligence officer involved in covert operations, was much wounded, much decorated, etc., etc. None of these claims are true, none. He did join the Navy, and he did become an officer, but his actual career was ill-starred, to say the least.
In one area, Hubbard did perform extremely well. He made huge sums of money. Money was an obsession. In 1948, he said the best way to make $1 million was to start one's own religion. 2 years later, he founded Scientology. And in a directive to his followers, he confirmed his priorities.
Make money. Make more money. Make other people produce so as to make money.
Hubbard's bridge to total freedom can be crossed by anyone who can afford it. The full counselling programme costs at least £60,000 per person. Some followers have paid £100,000. In Brighton, Nicola Trudgeon was caught up in the Hubbard money-making machine. In the space of 4 weeks, she handed over nearly £8,000 to the town's Scientology centre. She believed the money would help lead her to spiritual freedom. At least that was what Roger Kay, who runs the centre, told her.
He persuaded me that I needed something called a life repair, which was to get over the initial problems that I had through experiences in my past. And that was to cost me £1,725. I was reluctant. I mean, that sort of figure was a lot of money, and I did question the amount. I was chatted to and talked to and said, well, a university course would cost you much more than that. Well, after the life repair had run, I then again had another interview with Roger Kay, and I was persuaded that I should take the journey up to clear, which is to a state where you completely lose your reactive mind and are totally clear and free. That was to cost me just over £6,000, £6,200.
Nicola Trudgeon told the Scientologists at Brighton that her annual salary was only £7,000. She says their response was to suggest she took out large loans and lie on the application forms by falsely claiming that the loan was for a car or home improvement. But as well as losing money, Nicola Trudgeon was losing faith in Scientology. She took up the cult's promise of a refund and was repaid some £6,000, but only after Scientology was ordered by a court to pay it. Yet the cult is extremely rich. Recent documents from St Hill, obtained by Facing South, show the total income for the 7 Scientology centres in Britain in just 1 week was over £55,000. Apart from the regional organisations, there are 10 recruiting centres, including 4 on the south coast. Much of the money they raise goes to the headquarters in East Grinstead, and some from here to the United States. In the past, huge amounts of cash were siphoned off by Hubbard for his personal use. Some went into Swiss bank accounts, though Hubbard was reluctant to admit it.
I don't have Swiss bank accounts. There is a bank account in Switzerland. I don't know how much money is in it, but not very much.
In fact, Hubbard siphoned off millions of dollars for his personal accounts via a front company registered in Liberia. On his behalf, the money was then distributed to secret accounts in Liechtenstein and Luxembourg. Former aides have testified that Hubbard took tens of millions of dollars out of Scientology. Although ordinary Scientologists were unaware of this diversion of funds, some were becoming disillusioned with another aspect of Scientology's finances. Steve Bisbee left the cult in 1982. He was unhappy that so little was spent on the basic welfare of staff.
The staff pay was £4 a week. In practice, £4 a week was rarely gotten by anybody. I can show you my own P45 from those days, which proves the amount of money that was paid out. And if you care to look at the statistics of the amount of gross income that was taken in during that period from the church, there is an incredible discrepancy.
But the Scientology officials at St. Hill insist their money is well spent on running the church organizations, or as they call them, the orgs.
All of the management, the top management of the church, is done from the States, and as such there's a service which comes back. So the management is you answer this maybe, you know better.
To be honest with you, I don't have all the specifics on the money flows. I know that we've opened up in 7 countries, and I know that money is going out there to set up orgs and so on. And, I mean, short of going and getting my accountants, I can't answer your question in the detail that you want. Do you see what I mean?
Other ex-Scientologists, like Morag Belmain, claim there's been relentless penny-pinching within the cult. And she says that the constant emphasis on money has had disastrous human consequences, particularly on children's welfare. Morag Belmain worked for 6 years in a nursery at Stonelands, a hostel for Scientology staff near East Grinstead.
In Scientology, they considered that putting somebody to look after children was a waste of manpower. So that meant that they didn't actually look after them. Now, if you have a big group of children and you have nobody looking after them, also you have no funds to buy basic equipment, then you get a rabble. And that's what we had. They didn't get looked after. They used to run wild, you know, and basically turn into little criminals.
At Stonelands, Morag Belmain found that a lack of cash to pay the bills often meant harsh measures. It happened once in the depths of winter.
The idea was, because there wasn't enough money to pay these bills, the punishment, shall we say, for that was to cut off all the heating, cut off all the hot water. And we lived, well, with no heating, no electricity. And also, we were all put on a diet of beans and rice, and that included the children. So these little kids, 1, 2, 3, all they ate was beans and rice.
For each new recruit, there's more money for the cult, and the energy put into recruitment can be seen at Brighton on every day of the year. In Scientology, a likely candidate is called raw meat. If he agrees to take the personality test they offer, it won't be long before the Scientologist announces who he is and broaches the subject of money. We secretly recorded an interview between one recruitment officer and a Facing South researcher posing as a student. Inside the recruitment centre, he was taken to an upstairs office.
Hello?
Only minutes into the conversation that followed, the Scientologist was asking for cash for a short initial course.
The actual cost of it is £115. That's inclusive of VAT. It would take
£115 in most cases would be only a first instalment. Each course has another fee, and the Scientologists, where possible, prefer payment in advance.
What I'd need, bank name, branch address, and if you know it, your account number.
I can't tell you the number. I can give you the name and the address.
That'll be sufficient now.
Okay.
I can set this up there.
Right.
Okay, I'll show you how to do it. I'll get back to you in a second.
Great, thanks.
The personality test offered in Brighton is one way of involving people in Scientology. There are others. An advertisement in a national newspaper offers help for all kinds of ailments, from tiredness to fungal infections. It's placed by the Candida Albicans Advice Centre of East Grinstead. Candida's consultant, Dr. Dorothy West, turns out to be a long-standing Scientologist, and her advice group has recommended auditing as part of their treatment. Candida is sponsored and supplied by G&G Vitamin Centre, based in East Grinstead. The company is run by a husband and wife who are also long-standing Scientologists. The wife, Sheila Gaiman, is Executive Director of Scientology's Social Coordination Bureau. But G&G's solicitors say the company has no legal, corporate, nor financial ties with Scientology. By whatever route people reach Scientology, once there they discover that total obedience to the cult's hierarchy is the top priority. The elite core of Scientologists at St. Hill dress in naval uniform, a custom stemming from Hubbard's Navy career. As Hubbard on his ocean-going yacht saw it, ordinary members were to obey instructions without question, for their own good.
When somebody enrolls, consider he or she has joined up for the duration of the universe. Never permit an open-minded approach. When Mrs. Pattycake comes to us to be taught, turn that wandering doubt into a fixed, dedicated glare, and she'll win, and we'll all win.
But to Hubbard's mind, the worst offence of all was to quit the ranks and then indulge in open criticism. For such defectors, and indeed for any critics, he had a special venom.
The law can be used very easily to harass, and enough harassment on somebody will generally be sufficient to cause his professional decease. If possible, of course, ruin him utterly.
In another directive, Hubbard orders cult members to stamp out opposition by discrediting and destroying the critic's reputation. He tells them,
1. Spot who is attacking us. 2. Start investigating them promptly for felonies or worse. 3. Start feeding lurid blood, sex, crime, actual evidence on the attackers, to the press.
Hubbard ordered that private detectives be used to enforce these measures. This is one of several private detectives photographed outside the house of a Scientologist defector in East Grinstead who complained he was being harassed. And only last week, a private detective hired by Scientology shot at 2 Sunday Times journalists investigating the cult. Hubbard branded Scientology critics suppressive persons. He said they were fair game, and therefore
Maybe deprived of property or injured by any means by any Scientologist without any discipline of the Scientologist. Maybe tricked, sued or lied to or destroyed.
One man declared a suppressive person was Marcus Allen. He was chairman of the trustees of Greenfield School near East Grinstead. Though the school says it's independent, it's run by Scientologists. It boasts charitable status in the prospectus. This means substantial cash benefits through tax relief. Marcus Allen became increasingly hostile to the cult because of its demand for total loyalty. He was finally summoned to a meeting at St. Hill Manor, where he says 2 senior officials presented him with reports on his behavior written by other Scientologists. They cross-examined him, then accused him of associating with opponents of the cult.
I was asked if I would stop seeing these people. I said no, I choose my own friends, and I would see the people I chose to see. On that response, they said, well, if you wish to continue seeing these people, you may do so. But we want to know all the conversations you have with them. You must report back to us what is said and who these other people see. I declined the option and left. I was being asked to spy on my friends, which I found extremely distasteful, and from an organization which calls itself a church, I found this almost unbelievable.
Soon after that meeting, Marcus Allen's 14-year-old son, Alexander, was drawn into the dispute. He was about to sit his O-levels at Greenfields. But the day after his father was declared a suppressive, Alexander was called to a meeting with the headmistress and her deputy.
I was waiting in the office to go home, and Margaret Hodkin and Mark McQuaid walked in, and they sat down at the desk and said just very simply, until the situation with your father, with Scientology, had been cleared up, it would be best for me to stay at home.
The headmistress, Margaret Hodkin, claimed that Alexander was sent home because his stammer had become worse. She denied he'd been expelled. But Marcus Allen complained his son had been made a scapegoat.
I said this was totally outrageous, that a child could be victimized in this way. So there I was, 15 minutes before the new term was due to begin. My son had no school to go to. I had no satisfactory explanation as to why he had been, in effect, expelled. The experiences I'd been through as a result of Greenfield School and Scientology served really to confirm the belief I'd had that for me to remove myself from any association with Scientology was the correct decision.
Marcus Allen and other critics are determined to expose just what Scientology means. But every day, new people are still being recruited to the cause. It's business as usual at St. Hill today. Even disenchanted ex-members concede that Scientology can help some people. But they say it's obsessed with making money and suppressing opposition, and that families are too often the victims of their loved ones' blind faith. Families like the Lillys, they recall the joyous moment when their daughter Lissa came home, having apparently decided to leave the cult, but she didn't stay. Roger Kay from the Brighton Scientology Centre followed her to the house. When John Lilly told him Lissa might never go back, the Scientologist wasn't satisfied.
Roger Kay said, well, if that was the case, it was very serious, and he would have to consider how much money our daughter owed for all the courses that she'd had. That infuriated me, and I said, well, righto then, Roger, write it down now, and then I shall submit my account to you for all the time and hours that she has worked for you for nothing, and my figure will be more than yours. It didn't happen, of course. We shouldn't have allowed her, you see. We should have physically stopped her, but you don't do that sort of thing. She went back, and then the whole thing starts over again. Very sad.